Hello, everybody, and welcome to CaveNet, the NSS webinar series. Tonight, we have a great presentation. It's very unusual, and I'd like to also thank our sponsors, Edwards Aquifer, for their generous donation to help us get our webinar series up and running and off the ground. And, tonight, we're going to be discussing, Jut is going to be talking about the mysteries of Easter Island caves. Now, Jut is a very experienced caver, and hang on just a second, and trying to get, having a slight technical difficulty on my end. My apologies. I am so sorry. Okay, Jut is a research ecologist with the Colorado Plateau Research Station and a PhD candidate in biological services. And he is, this is the first time we've had this much trouble. This is, sorry, Jet, this is, normally we don't have any problems like this. All right. It's Murphy's Law, what can I say? Yeah, sorry. Okay. Judd is a research ecologist with Colorado Plateau Research Station and a PhD candidate in biological services at Northern University, Arizona, Flagstaff. He has a Master's of Science in Environmental Science and Policy from NAU and the UNESCO, which is Cousteau Certificate of Ecological from the Free University of Brussels, Belgium. He has authored and co-authored over 50 peer-reviewed articles, technical reports, and published abstracts on a range of topics including wildlife habitat modeling, cave biology, NASA education programs, cave detection techniques for the Earth, Moon, and Mars. Research highlights to date include identification of 3 new genera and nearly 30 new species of cave-dwelling arthropods from the southwestern U.S., and at least 9 new species of insects from Easter Island. He has conducted philological studies in Belize, northern Chile, Easter Island, Hawaii, and throughout the American Southwest. He is an invited group member of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's White Nose Syndrome Disease Management Working Group, a Science Advisory Board member for the Easter Island Foundation, chairman, also chairman of the Southwest chapter of the Explorers Club, and a member of the Flags and Honors Committee of the Explorers Club. From the year 2006 to 2011, he served as Director at Large, Cave Conservation and Management Section of the NSS. He is a fellow of both the Explorers Club and the Royal Geographical Society, and an elected member of the Cigna Phi Northern Arizona University. He's a very busy person. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and turn this over to Jut so he can start his presentation. And let's see, Jut, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hello?
Hello? Hello, Debbie.
All right. Yes, hello, Jet. That is a very impressive resume you've got there. It's incredible. And we are very, very happy to be able to have you on here tonight. And I'm grateful that you were able to take time to go ahead and come and give us your information education. Now, for all of you listening, what we have is the ability to record all these sessions. We post them on the NSS website. We encourage you to go ahead and download these and use them as grotto presentations for civic groups, for pretty much anything you would like. These webinars are for our NSS members and our cavers. And Jut, I'll turn this over to you, and this is a really interesting presentation, people. Thank you, Jut.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and thank you very much for that very warm introduction. And thank you, folks, for joining us this evening. I hope to transport you from your living rooms, your offices, wherever you are, to Easter Island. That is my objective. And we'll start it off today by saying greetings in Rapa Nui, which is Yorana. So although I can't hear you say it back, say it, Yorana. Let me feel the warmth coming back from you guys. Thank you so much once again. And I tell you, this is, I've been working on Rapa Nui for for 4 seasons, over 5 years, studying various aspects of caves as well as the entomology of the island, and this is a place that I just hold so near and dear to my heart. I love the island, I love the culture, I love the people, and hopefully the enthusiasm that I have for this place will come through in this presentation over the course of the next hour. But first, it would be disingenuous of me if I were to proceed with this talk without giving credit where credit is due. I kind of pilfered the title of my talk from Catherine Rutledge, who was an ethnographer who did the first work looking at the Rapa Nui people and culture back in 1919. She was actually there from 1914 to 1915 conducting her expedition on the ethnology of the island. Rapa Nui itself is a very remote place. It's 63 square miles. It is roughly 2,300 miles west of South America and about 1,300 miles east of the Pitcairn Islands, which is where the famed mutiny on the Bounty took place. It is governed by Chile, and as a result, the second language there is Spanish. The first language, of course, is Rapa Nui, which is a Polynesian dialect. And it is the most inhabited, most remote inhabited place on Earth. And as a result, it's been given the name by the islanders Topito Te Huena, which is the navel of the world. To give you an idea of exactly where Rapa Nui is contextually on the planet, Rapa Nui comprises the southeastern corner of the Polynesian Triangle. The northern extent of the Polynesian Triangle is Hawaii, and the southwestern corner is New Zealand. And there's a settlement legend according to the Rapa Nui people as far as how the Polynesians actually got to Easter Island. And this was based on a vision that one of Hotumatua's men had. And it was that he was going to find and settle in a new land. So Hotumatua and his followers took out from what was named Hiva, which from what I was able to do based on the research, a couple of accounts suggest that it was from the Marquesas Islands. And they settled and they set out to a land unknown, which would be Rapa Nui. And what you see here is two pictures of, or two canoes here. They're outrigger canoes or twin-hulled canoes. And you can see here, by the looks of it, they were rather extensive ships. You could hold up to 50 people on these boats, and they had these amazing capabilities of navigation. They could navigate from the stars based on the sun and even wave movements. They would be able to tell how close land was based on how the waves were moving. Aside from the settlement legend itself, we do have C14 data that suggests that the Polynesians actually arrived to Easter Island between 800 and 1200 CE. And when they did make these long-distance journeys or voyages, what they would tend to carry with them is basically the creature comforts of home, much like when we would take a trip, we would take all those things with us that would make us comfortable. Well, they did the same thing. They took taro, bananas, chickens, and rats with them. Excuse me just a sec, I'm having, okay, there we go. Now the way that Rapa Nui got its name, Easter Island, was from a Dutch explorer, Commander Jacob Rogenbeen, who spotted Easter Island on, oddly enough, Easter Sunday in April of 1722. Hold on just a sec, wow, Murphy has ruined the day here. My computer, oh, here we go. It had just frozen up and now it's working again. Concerning the environment and ecology, Rapa Nui has an extensively long history of forest conversion and other intensive human use. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Rapa Nui, Rapa Nui is basically, and truly is, a textbook example, according to many ecology and environmental science textbooks, of what we should not do as a human race. The Rapa Nui developed a very complex society, which was basically premised on ancestor veneration, with the construction of these large moai sitting on these very large platforms called ahu. As a result, the villages burgeoned. They looked for more resources to use. They cleared more land for agriculture. They cleared more land for moai construction, for villages, etc. And as a result, it is believed that they met this environmental threshold where the excuse me just a second. So what ultimately happened was they reached an environmental threshold that, according to Jared Diamond, resulted in a societal and an environmental collapse. Now, I don't know if I will buy into that 100%, but certainly there was extensive forest conversion, and later on in history, when the Europeans essentially commandeered the island, the British took it over and used it as a massive sheep herding operation. Over 40,000 sheep ran roughshod across this entire island, and as a result, I like to refer to this as most likely the final nail in the ecological coffin. So what happened as a result of this extensive human use on the island was that there are no longer any stands of native vegetation, and all terrestrial vertebrates have gone extinct. So what we see today is something vastly different than what the ancient Rapa Nui saw when they first arrived. So as a result of that, what I think we need to do is to look to those smaller organisms that might still be on the island, that might still be endemic or native. So I suggest that the entomological resources of the island are likely to be the last vestiges of the native terrestrial ecosystems of Easter Island. So what we do know about the arthropods of Rapa Nui, we have approximately 400 arthropods are known to occur on the island. Of these, less than 4% are either endemic or indigenous. And by endemic, I mean they occur on Easter Island and nowhere else in the entire world. And by indigenous, I mean that they arrived to the island without the assistance of man. For example, there is a species of dragonfly that it occurs all over the world, and it has this incredible dispersal capability. And it also occurs on Rapa Nui. That is an example of an indigenous species. We do have one recently discovered new species. Around 2008, a Spanish caving expedition team discovered a new species of springtail or Columbella. But aside from that, there have been no other cave research studies conducted on Rapa Nui. Concerning archaeology, Thor Heyerdahl is often credited for launching what is now modern archaeological investigations on the island. And during his expedition in 1955 through 1956, he conducted numerous excavations on the island and really put Rapa Nui under the global spotlight. He published a book called Aku Aku, and it became an international bestseller. And as you might expect with this burgeoning culture in a very prolific society and 63 square miles to grow within, the entire island of Rapa Nui is indeed an archaeological site. So as we might suspect, all the efforts to date, archaeologically speaking, have been focused on understanding the Rapa Nui culture from surface investigations, from looking at the moai, from looking at the settlement patterns on the island as far as the villages are concerned, by excavating around those sites. And no attention to date had been placed on looking at subterranean archaeological resources. So we're getting on to the mysteries here. Subterranean mystery number 1. Do caves serve as relictual environments? As I mentioned earlier, there's been an extensive transformation of the island from an island that was dominated by palm trees and forests to an island that looks to me a lot like Scotland. It's a grassland with non-native eucalyptus trees that have been planted by Europeans to form these sporadic stands across the island. So the question being is much like we know about arthropods, cave-adapted arthropods elsewhere on the planet, that a lot of them retreated underground during the last glaciation. So as surface conditions became unfavorable, these animals sought more favorable conditions underground. My question is did insects on Rapa Nui do the same thing? But their response was due to environmental change. And really what would be proof positive of endemic species on Rapa Nui would be the existence of troglomorphic organisms, those cave-adapted animals. Turning our attention towards subterranean mystery number 2, how were caves used by the Rapa Nui? Now we know from numerous anecdotal accounts of how the Rapa Nui used caves. We know that there are birthing caves where a pregnant woman would actually go to have her child. I have a lot of friends there that can actually point. When we drive by the cave, that's where I was born. There's also Cave of the Virgins, where young nubile women would go to this cave during a certain ceremony. It was called the Birdman ceremony, and they would be there for an extended period of time to where their skin would grow white because they weren't in the sun. And the Rapa Nui men found that attractive. We also know that that caves were used as fortifications. Given all these different uses that we know about from Easter Island as far as how the Rapa Nui used caves, it has not been quantified. It has not been studied in a systematic fashion. And this is the big one here. This is the subterranean mystery number 3. Do caves still contain ancient Rongo-Rongo tablets? Now this is a writing system, and this is the only writing system in all of Polynesia. And interestingly, and unfortunately, no one has cracked this code. No one has been able to cipher these. No one has been able to make sense of these hieroglyphs. The problem being is that there was a period of turmoil on the island. There was a period where there was clanal strife. There were factions. There was infighting. There was also the Peruvian slave raids, and then there were epidemics that Europeans passed on to the Rapa Nui, smallpox and tuberculosis. And what it seems to have taken place is that they lost all of their wise men, all of their elders, all of their shamans, those individuals that knew how to translate the Rapa Nui language, the Rongo-Rongo. We do have 26 pieces of inscribed wood in various museums and private collections throughout the world. Unfortunately, and this is something that disturbs the Rapa Nui people quite a bit, and I fall right into their company as well. I tend to agree with this, is that none of these Rongo-Rongo tablets are housed at the Rapa Nui Museum. All of these Rongo-Rongo tablets are elsewhere, scattered throughout the planet. And as a result, what I would say here that our quest for the Rongo-Rongo, to be looking for these Rongo-Rongo tablets in caves, are really tantamount to the Holy Grail. It is indeed the Polynesian Holy Grail. And this would be something, and as I'm kind of giving away part of the punchline here, if we had found Rongo-Rongo tablets in caves, you would have found out about it a lot sooner than you are right now, because this would have been something that would have drawn a lot of attention. It would have been undoubtedly covered by outlets like National Geographic and Discovery Channel. So this is something that is very important to the Rapa Nui people and very important to the global community at large. So this is our study area. This is Rapa Nui here. This is a Landsat image courtesy of NASA. Our study area is within this red square here. It's approximately 5 kilometers north of the village of Tongaroa, which is where the major concentration of folks live. Rapa Nui has a population of about 5,000 people. Roughly half of those are descendants of the Rapa Nui, or the ancient Polynesians, if you will. And this is just basically a zoomed-in portion of this map. We looked at 10 caves in the Roiho flow. This flow is between 2,000 to 3,000 years in age, and it is actually the youngest flow on Rapa Nui. Our objectives are as follows. When looking at the biology, we were looking to identify endemic and indigenous arthropods and investigate the importance of caves as relictual habitats, habitats that are sheltered environments that may permit insects to persist despite the dramatic environmental surface, the dramatic change on the surface. Also, we wanted to look at a baseline comparison of the surface arthropod community to that of the subterranean arthropod community. And finally, we wanted to establish a biological baseline for future monitoring of caves, and specifically those caves that may contain endemic species. For the archaeological work, we set out to characterize the different types of use by the Rapa Nui and develop a more comprehensive understanding regarding the importance of caves to both the history as well as the people of Rapa Nui. And finally, as I pretty much beat that dead horse concerning, is we were also searching for wooden artifacts that have Rongo inscriptions on them. Our management objectives, the significance of this project first and foremost is the identification of sensitive cultural and natural resources that might be of great importance for both conservation and management of caves. Secondly, we wanted to, and perhaps as important as the first objective, is to identify those caves where tourism and economic development may continue, of course with minimal impacts to the resources, because Easter Island is a tourism-based economy. So to say that this cave is significant, and this one should be gated, and this one should have limited use, is not doing a service to the Rapa Nui people, because they still depend on the tourism dollars. So our objectives here were to balance science and conservation with economic growth, and also identifying those caves where they could continue to have ecotourism endeavors. As for management, new as well as non-native invasive species are going to be of critical importance for both Rapa Nui National Park and the Department of Agriculture of Chile. Firstly, because of the extensive environmental change that has occurred on Easter Island, there is virtually no native ecosystems left. So any new species that we could say are indeed endemic to the island would be of the utmost conservation importance for both the resource managers as well as the islanders. And secondly, because a lot of the Rapa Nui grow their own food, and they have their private gardens at home, the identification of non-native species that might be occurring as accidentals within caves that might be agricultural pests, identifying those species early on would also be beneficial to management. As I mentioned earlier, the identification of caves containing endemic and relic arthropods would be of the utmost importance for conservation and management, as well as those containing significant cultural resources. So moving right into the results here, this is from the invertebrate sampling. We have 24 non-native invertebrates that were previously uncatalogued from Easter Island, meaning that there were no records of their existence until we conducted this work. We found 10 new species. That number had increased slightly from what Debbie had mentioned earlier on. And here is a breakdown by group. We have 2 new species of isopods or pill bugs, 1 new species of mite, 5 new species of springtails or columbella, 1 new species of cricket, and 1 new bark louse species. Unfortunately, none of these were cave adapted. None of them were troglomorphic. Interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, one of our objectives was to draw comparisons between the surface community and the subsurface community of arthropods. Only one of the new species that were detected in both caves and on the surface. So to us, this begins to suggest that maybe caves are serving as relectual environments. This is just a summary graph here of the total number of individuals detected per cave. We detected over 1,300 individuals during this work. You can see here that cave number 74 had the greatest number of individuals, followed by cave 127. Concerning observed richness, or just the number of species observed per cave, similar pattern you can see here in cave number 1574 had the greatest number of species, right around 36. And then the rest of the caves all had similar numbers of species. And here's some of the, what we're, I guess, kind of going out somewhat on a limb and saying that these are presumed endemic species. I do have a question mark at the end there. This is a new species of isopod. And interestingly, this is very similar to an Hawaiian genus that Stefano Pettiati identified several years back with Frank Howarth. And firstly, one of the questions is my gosh, if Hylonosia is indeed on Easter Island, how did it get there? And we do know that the Polynesians, when they were moving between islands, would, as I mentioned earlier, would take things with them that they wanted, things, creature comforts from home. And if they're moving plants with them on their boats from one island to the next, there's going to be invertebrates within that soil that they're carrying with them, that they're containing those plants with them. So that is a possibility. The second possibility to Hylonosia is that Stefano indicated to me is that it's close to Hylonosia, so it might not be Hylonosia. He's still looking at these specimens, and we're going to be working up a paper on this. So there is a possibility that it's not actually Hylonosia, that it's another genus entirely. This is a new species of, another new species of isopod. And this is our new booklouse species. This was a very common species as far as its occurrence within caves. We detected the species in 5 different caves within our study area. This was a surprise to us. This is a new species of cricket. And this is a large-bodied animal, and there have been extensive studies on, extensive is a bit of an overstatement. I would say there have been numerous studies on Easter Island looking at the arthropod communities over the years. Over 70 published works have occurred on this topic, and thus it was surprising to us that we did find a new cricket species. This was the one, too, that occurred both on the surface and within caves. We found 2 of these, which means we have more work to do because it's very difficult to describe a new animal with so few specimens. Another explanation that we did only identify 2 specimens was that perhaps this is endemic, and we do know that endemic species tend to be more rare, and maybe that's an explanation. Maybe this is indeed an endemic species and it's just rare. Moving on to newly cataloged species. This is a newly cataloged stone centipede. It has a cosmopolitan distribution, and it's, I always kind of describe this as very Lewis Carroll-esque. It looks like something out of Alice in Wonderland, at least to me. And we found it in the moss and fern gardens within the entrances and beneath the skylights of the caves where we were studying them. This is a newly cataloged species of scorpion, and however, this scorpion wasn't mentioned in Aku Aku. Well, we presume this scorpion was mentioned in Aku Aku. Heyerdahl described finding a cave, and as he starts to peel back the rocks to get into the cave, several scorpions are beneath one of the rocks that he removes. And there is a possibility, a very good possibility, that this is the scorpion that he was referring to. This scorpion has a pantropical distribution, which means it occurs throughout the tropical belt. And we only found one, and it was below a skylight. This is a new species of fulcid spider, or I'm sorry, not a new species, but a newly cataloged species of fulcid spider. It has a cosmopolitan distribution, and it was one of the most common arachnids that we encountered during the study, and it's typically one of the most common arachnids in general, especially in human settlements. If you see spider webs, cobwebs in the corners of your rooms up along the ceilings, it's usually done by a fulcid spider. This is also a newly cataloged species, and it has a cosmopolitan distribution. The most abundant invertebrate that we encountered during the study was this guy. This is Porciello scaber. It has a cosmopolitan distribution. It was first documented in 1914, and apparently it's done very well since then. It has, on the surface, we detected over 4,000 individuals, and in caves we detected almost 80 individuals. This was one that was somewhat anticlimactic when we encountered this. Initially, what we thought when we encountered this white millipede was that, oh my goodness, this is either a cave-limited animal or perhaps it's a troglomorphic organism. And we got a little excited, and we collected specimens, and then we returned the following season and went back to the same sites where we found this animal initially. And when we did, we found these brown centipedes. And then I did a little bit more homework and realized that, okay, well, these are juveniles, and the brown ones are the adults. So it was anticlimactic. We thought that we had a cave-adapted animal, when indeed we did not. There were, and interestingly, this is a very common animal. It occurred in 5 of the caves that we studied. We detected 123 of these animals within the caves that we studied. It has a cosmopolitan distribution. Ophidelus gracilis is also known as the garden centipede, which means, well, by the name, it occurs in gardens, and it occurs all over the place. It occurs all over the world. This is a salticid spider, or jumping spider, and it has a cosmopolitan distribution. It was first documented on Rapa Nui in 1924. We detected it in 6 caves, and this animal was quite common within skylights and within the entrances of caves, wherever there was a leaf litter or duff. We pretty much, you just peeled back the leaf litter, and 9 times out of 10 you would stumble across one of these salticids. These are some examples of the different roach species that occur on Rapa Nui. There are no native roaches on the island. 7 roach species have been introduced, and this is part of a study that actually that Frank Howarth and I are working on. And the Indicus was actually first cataloged during the study, and you can see the one. This is the caption up here in the top right of your screen, and this particular species is a very neat cockroach, and we found it around the entrances of caves. Turning our attention to the archaeology of caves, archaeological evidence as well as ethnographic accounts suggest that caves served at least 6 general functions by the Rapa Nui, and here is a list of them. Anakionka are refuges, and they're used during times of conflict. There were habitation caves, both used permanently and temporarily. There were caves that were used for both water storage and collection. And manavai, which are basically, it's a sunken agricultural garden, basically. And these would occur within the collapse pits of lava tubes. Ritualistic use, both primary and secondary interments, and what that is where they were actually putting the bones of their ancestors within these caves. And finally, storage of precious or ceremonial items, and that was part of our Rongo quest, was to look in the cracks and crevices of these caves in hopes of being able to find a Rongo tablet, which could be housed in the Rapa Nui Museum. This is a summary table of use of the 10 caves that we studied during this work. You can see here that Ecological, or the refuge caves, occurred 6 out of 10 times, so it was quite a common use. Habitation, most of the caves that we encountered were used for habitation. And interestingly, and not surprisingly, based on where we were, we have half of the caves that we studied that were used for water collection and or storage. And the really neat thing about the area that we were studying is it is the only place on the island where there is a ahu with the moai positioned on the inland of the island. It's basically, I would say, I haven't measured it, but I believe at least a few kilometers from the coast. And this is the only occurrence of an inland ahu. And my guess is the reason why this ahu was placed inland was because of the water. There were several caves, you can see here 5 of them, that contain significant amounts of fresh water. And when you're dealing with an oceanic island that is volcanic in origin, and it's highly fractured, and you have only 3 other places on the island where fresh, potable drinking water is collected, well, the 4th location is going to be important. And that's what we're seeing here. And that's what we're suggesting as well. Looking at Ecological, I do apologize for the image on the left, but I hope that you're able to make out that they put rocks along the walls, and basically they modified the entrances. And you can see here in the bottom right image that you have essentially a cap rock, and then you have these other stones that are basically constricting the entrance. And the reason why this is very important is that back during times of conflict on the island, that folks were living in caves. And if a rival clan arrived to your cave and they wanted to cause you trouble, they couldn't just march their men into the cave. They had to slow down, and they had to go one by one through this constricted passageway. And often what would happen, based on anecdotal accounts from Rapa Nui that we've spoken with, as a foe would shoot through this constricted entrance, there would be the inhabitant of the cave waiting on the other end with a spear or a big stick or a big rock to take them out. So quite a few of these caves, a total of 6, had modified entrances as well as collapsed pits. And here's an example of another example of Ecological, and also suggesting habitation as well. These are mata'a, which are basically spear points. They're obsidian spear points. Here's another example of habitation. These are called umus. These are cooking pits. And as you know from Polynesia, probably seen it on TV with Hawaiian culture as well. They would cook. They would wrap their food in banana leaves and put it within the ground to cook it. And they would take the coals from the fire and then place them on top, and the hot rocks that they heated up as well through the building of the fire. And you would basically have layers of food, rocks, and ash. It would then be all buried, and that would prepare your meal. You come back a few hours later and dig it up, and you'd have a great meal. So anyhow, that's what this is. This is a umu oven. And we found these in numerous entrances. This is water storage, Anavai. If you look at the top right image here, you can see this nice definitive wall here. This is shallow. This is probably about, when we were there, probably about 4 to 5 inches deep. But basically this is a retaining wall. And this formed a pool underground, and literally 5 feet away from the other side of the pool, that's not featured within this image, was a manavai, was a garden. So you could take your gourd, walk over to this pool, collect your water, walk 5 to 10 feet, and water your garden. So this was quite ingenious as well as quite convenient for the Rapa Nui to have these water sources right next to their gardens. This is another example of what we believe to be a cistern. We've put a question mark here. You can see these walls that are within the cave here, and you can also see that there's a lot of mud and silt here collected on the ground, And, you know, in order for us to determine definitively whether or not this was a cistern or not, we would need to do a shovel pit, a shovel test to dig down and see if we can actually find evidence suggesting that there are, you know, nice layers of silt suggesting that it was indeed a cistern. Here's examples of Monavai and Anna, or Cave 74. There was extensive architectural modification of collapse pits and skylights for the purpose of food production. And what they were growing within these collapse pits were taro, bananas, and sugarcane. And the idea is that, one, it protects the gardens and the plants from the elements, from salt spray, which can certainly severely damage agricultural crops. And I also believe that there's probably some radiative qualities associated with having your plants within a cave that has exposed black basalt. And during the cooler months, that basalt is still going to heat up, and then overnight and throughout the day, it's going to give off heat. So it probably forms a nice little microenvironment for these plants. And I don't, to my knowledge, there's been no experiments done to look at this, but it's likely that this was very effective for being able to grow food year-round and quite productively. This is another image of a Monavai. You can see here in the foreground these large-leafed plants. This is taro. The grassy stringy plant in the right of the image is sugarcane, and in the background you can see banana trees. And this is something that it's not actively used anymore, but I do know that Rapa Nui will occasionally stop by this cave if there are bananas and grab a few off of the trees. Regarding sacred and important artifacts, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of let the cat out of the bag at the beginning of the presentation. There was one Rongo tablet, or actually a fragment of a tablet, that was found in the 1950s by Thomas Barthel, and it had a few inscriptions on it. It was found within a cave and was in poor condition. And interestingly, this could be added to the mysteries of Easter Island caves, because I received an email from Fisher a few days ago, which he indicated that this Rongo tablet fragment has disappeared. It cannot be found. Actually, Barthel passed away, I believe, I don't recall it exactly, I think 20 plus years ago. And the location, the precise location of that tablet pretty much went away when he did. So fortunately, Fisher did find a rubbing of this of the inscription on the tablet, and it's going to be written up at some point in a scientific paper. But that's the only known Rongo tablet fragment that has been found, and but the quest will continue. Regarding ritualistic use, there were 3 caves where we believe ritualistic use to have taken place. Primary and secondary interments, or burials, were found within 3 caves, and we did find 2 skulls which were positioned on the ledge of one cave, and actually within the ledge of an entrance to one cave. And I and others believe that basically these were positioned for tourism. You know, it's a mysterious cave on Easter Island, and you enter the cave and you look to your left and there are 2 skulls. I did examine the skulls. I didn't touch them, but I did look at them, and they were of elderly individuals. There was clear evidence of ossification over both the mandible and maxilla, where the tooth sockets once were. So you could tell that they had lost their teeth earlier on in years and continued living a healthy life, and the bone just basically grew over those tooth sockets. So wrapping up here, concerning the biology, from our work, what we've been able to show is that cave ecosystems clearly exhibit a significant, if not complete, influence of non-native surface species. However, there is indeed compelling evidence with these 10 new species discoveries, 11 if you include what the Spanish contributed in terms of a new Columbulas species back in 2008, that caves may indeed serve as sheltered environments from dramatic environmental surface change. As far as the archaeology is concerned, caves have clearly been heavily impacted over the years. Early explorers and others encouraged the Rapa Nui to remove artifacts from their caves. Many of these artifacts are now in the Rapa Nui Museum. There has been unregulated cave tourism, and that clearly has impacts. That has occurred over the years. And also, interestingly, the Rapa Nui people use their caves all the time. They have family caves, and they will go and they will hold special events in the caves. So there's been this long use of caves by the Rapa Nui. And also, the further complicate matters archaeologically speaking is that, you know, the Rapa Nui culture, well, they're descendants from the Polynesians who settled the area, but that's their ancestors. So if they encounter a spearhead, a mata'a, or if they encounter some other artifact, well, hey, you know, it's their ancestors, so it's technically theirs, and I agree with that, and they take it with them, and it's on the mantles of their homes. I know of Rapa Nui people who have literally baskets full of these obsidian spear points. So you can see here that there's been a lot of things that have been moved around over time. So that's going to obscure the archaeological record and make piecing this puzzle back together a little difficult. So regarding our unsolved mysteries, well, if you could see me with my hand gestures right now, I would say this is the fish that was this big, and I would start with my hands being close together and then end with my hands being fully extended. We did find one mite that looked like it could be cave adapted, and I know that's, you know, really flimsy to make that statement, but it was found within the deep zone. It was during a bait sampling component of our work, and we were deep within a cave, and we saw a mite, and I tried to catch it, and it got away. But really what that underscores is we need to go back to that cave and sample again. This said, cave-adapted arthropods, although they remain elusive, I still feel that they exist, and that it's just a matter of time before we uncover them. And that goes for the Rongo tablets as well. As we know, being cavers, that there are many cracks and crevices within any given cave that you could stuff something within. With that in mind, it seems reasonable to suggest that by expanding an effort to look for Rongo to more caves, perhaps island-wide, perhaps more intensively revisiting some of the ones that we already went to, that we might ultimately stumble upon Rongo tablets. There are a few other unstudied cave resources that I wanted to mention because I do feel that they're important both for management and for documentation in general. First is rare or unique geological formations within caves. This has not been cataloged on the island, so this is something, there's certainly a need for this. And also further work on bacteria that may be important to medical science. We do know that rapamycin was found on Easter Island. We do know that the soil of Easter Island has medicinal properties that, oh gosh, I think the story that I read several years back suggested that it somehow is attributed to longevity and health. And that's obviously the soil wiggles, the microbes that are occurring within the soil that folks, I guess, eat. Also, and this to me is really, really important, is the spiritual or sacred places that may or may not contain visible archaeological resources but are nonetheless important to the Rapa Nui. And a clear example that we have here in the Southwest is the San Francisco Peaks. There is not a temple. There is no archaeological sites on the mountain at all. However, it is recognized as a sacred site to several tribes on the Colorado Plateau. Well, the same goes for these caves on Rapa Nui. Some of these caves are family caves, as I mentioned earlier. Some of these caves, there were certain ceremonies that took place. Coming-of-age ceremonies for women were held in one cave. Coming-of-age ceremonies for men were held in another cave. So there are numerous undocumented uses of these caves that were indeed sacred to the Rapa Nui people. And that needs to be documented as well and brought in to that decision-making framework when we ultimately decide how best to protect these caves on Rapa Nui. So as far as our management implications from this long-term study, obviously proper management of both natural and cultural resources that are described here is becoming increasingly important because, one, tourism is growing on Rapa Nui at a rapid rate. Secondly, the effects of global climate change are yet to be realized on Rapa Nui, and those could have effects on the species that we're identifying as being potential endemics. And finally, the near constant introduction of non-native species is creating competition for what we believe to be endemic species that we've discovered. So in aggregate, what we need to do is start developing this management framework so we can address these issues and best conserve these resources. And that's essentially what I tried to do in this 2001 interview that I did with El Mercurio de Santiago, which is one of two national papers in Chile, and basically it's saying that I'm sounding the alarm for protecting caves because there are no cave protection laws in effect for Chile and by extension for Rapa Nui Island. However, some really interesting movements are afoot. I was recently contacted by several of the folks who work at Parque Nacional Rapa Nui, and they're putting together the first cave resource management plan for Rapa Nui, which will also by extension be the first for all of Chile. And it's actually focusing on the study area that we just described here. And I would like to kind of close by stating that success of any management plan, especially when you're dealing with a indigenous culture, and is that community support and involvement is paramount. Working with the community, figuring out what their wants and needs are, being able to effectively balance tourism with conservation and management are going to be critically important. It's essentially going to make or break any cave resource management plan that they try to implement on Rapa Nui. And finally, I don't know how many folks in the audience are salivating at this point to get to Rapa Nui to go caving. I just wanted to provide a cautionary note. As you might have gathered by this talk thus far, the Rapa Nui people are very protective of their caves, and they consider all caves sacred. The past two major expedition teams, barring the team that I led, the Spanish expedition team and the Polish expedition team, there were team members that were threatened by Rapa Nui with sticks, and they were basically threatening to bash their heads in. And fortunately for both teams, there were team members on those teams that were able to explain what they were doing and were able to basically talk down these very aggravated Rapa Nui people. Secondly, the National Park is in the process of developing stricter management policies and guidelines, and they're also talking about closing a lot of the caves. When I was there back in 2001, the superintendent of Parque Nacional Rapa Nui asked me, why not close all the caves? And she's Rapa Nui, and once again, she recognizes the importance of these caves, and she basically wants she was advocating essentially a no tourism policy. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think once we weigh in all the different needs of the people and of the resource managers, I think we'll ultimately come to some sort of compromise where everything, well, not everything, and a compromise for that very reason. You don't get everything. But I think that there will be a result that everyone will be able to embrace and be proud of. And this was the expedition team from 2009. And my gosh, with a project this size, with thousands of specimens to be identified and sorted, there are so many people to thank. Firstly, Parque Nacional Rapa Nui, Javi Les with the Spanish expedition team provided us with all the maps. We have 3 different expedition teams that worked over the course of the past 4 seasons. There were several taxonomists, Ernest Bernard, Frank Howarth, Ed Mockford, Barry O'Connor, Stefano Castiati, who assisted in identifying invertebrates. My advisors for my dissertation, Dix and Stephen Somer, Dan Ruby provided a lot of these incredible images that I've shown here today. Kat Chapman was responsible for a lot of the imaging, the very high resolution insect images that I showed, and just a host of others. The Explorers Club and NSS did indeed partially fund this work as well. And also like to thank the Easter Island Foundation, Campo Alto Operaciones, and the Bishop Museum in Honolulu. And with that, I believe we can open it up to any questions.
Great. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and just push the little electronic hand. I'll see it go up and we'll unmute the lines. The reason we do it this way is to avoid incredible background noise that can be distracting for the people wanting to ask questions. So if we have any questions, please let me know, and we will go ahead and open the lines, and Jack can answer them. Now, how many people altogether were on your team? I wasn't able to get a complete count.
It essentially fluctuated over the years. In, I think, the 2018, we had 5 members. We had about as many, well, actually we had 8 members in 2009. 3 of the team members were there during part of the expedition. We basically had a few folks that were staggered throughout the 1-month period we were there. And in 2011, let me see here, I'll back up one slide. This was the team. It was me and Lázaro Pacarati. And
wow.
Lázaro, yes, it was a very incisive effort at that time. We were sampling the deep zones, looking for troglodytes at that time. And just to talk a little bit about Lázaro and his daughter Vicky, these 2 individuals are Rapa Nui speleology. Lázaro and his daughter, ever since Vicky was 10, he drug her through every cave on the island, and they had inventoried them, photographed them, taken notes about them, and Lázaro is very knowledgeable. He's also on the Council of Elders, and he's just a very knowledgeable individual in general as far as both caves and the ethnology of the island and the spirituality of the island and the different and the belief system that the ancient Rapa Nui held. Just a wonderful person to work with. I can't say enough good things about Lázaro. He's an amazing individual.
Okay, Gary Schindel has a question. I'm going to open the lines up so Gary can go ahead and speak with us. All right, Gary, go ahead.
Can you? I assume you can hear me? Yeah. Well, yes. One of the questions I had was the use of the term epigenic and hypogenic in a biologic context. I'm more used to those terms being used in hydrology. Could you maybe define a little better what they mean for us non-biologists?
Oh, epigean is referring to surface-dwelling communities. Hypogean is referring to cave-dwelling communities.
Okay, well, that sounds good. The other question I had was the lava flows that you were studying appear to be geologically fairly young. Do you think that there's been sufficient time to develop cave-adapted species in such young lava flows?
Yes, I do actually. There's a couple of lines of thinking concerning that question. Firstly, the rate at which animals had colonized Hawaii. Frank Howarth has done a lot of work looking at cave-adapted arthropods on Hawaii, and in particular on the Hawaiian Islands. And these animals had been able to successfully colonize caves and show evidence of troglomorphism in a very short amount of time. Also, there's the idea of dispersal, which is where these animals move in mesocaverns within the cracks and crevices of, well, basically the subterranean realm of Rapa Nui. So, and this has also been documented by Frank's work, where he's been able to show that troglodytes had colonized newly formed lava tubes, quite young. I don't recall the age precisely, but these were impressively young lava tubes, and that led further credibility to his idea that these animals were dispersing through the mesocaverns. And there's quite a bit of information in the literature concerning this very phenomena, so it's not something that's a novel idea. So those are two mechanisms right there for the possibility of there being cave-adapted animals within the Royal flow.
Okay. Let's see. Gary, do you have any more?
Yeah. No, thank you very much. That was a good answer.
Okay.
You're very welcome.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. One is, how do you pick your team, and what qualifications do they need?
Well, as we all know, one, not claustrophobic.
Yeah.
And really, the way that I've done this in the past is, well, it's really like you would apply for a job. I post an announcement, folks respond to the announcement, I examine their qualifications, their experience, their capabilities, and then I request letters of recommendation, 3 letters of recommendation. And that basically, say that this person is who they are and that they can do what they say they can do. And then I speak with them. And if we hit it off and they seem to be really nice people that I can get along with, then, of course, they're asked to join the team. And as we all know, it's working in these type of environments, working in remote areas and international travel, you really want to find folks that you get along with, that they're your kinsmen, folks that you resonate with. You don't want a bad apple in the bunch, because it can spoil an entire trip. And I've been in situations where that's happened, and I've been in situations where there's been just a wonderful bunch of people. And fortunately, my past several years of trips have been populated with just amazing people, and we haven't had any issues. So that's really the process for which I go by in selecting candidates for this type of work.
Okay. Another one I had was, are there specific educational qualifications necessary?
It depends, really. It depends on the nature of the work. Sometimes there's a cartographic mapping or a cartography component to the work. Well, at that point, biology isn't as important. If you can have somebody that maps caves really well and that can learn quickly, then that's a good fit. Oftentimes what we do with this, at least with the biological work, is we are indeed training folks before we go into the field, and once we get to the field. We had a 3-day training session in 2009 where everyone was trained and brought up to snuff. Make sure that everybody had the same or the relatively same level of knowledge and competence before they entered the field. Looking for invertebrates in caves is an art form. It truly is. Some folks can go in and walk out with 10 different species. Some people can walk in and be like, I don't see anything. So that type of training is indeed wanted for this type of work. But like I said, it really depends. It depends on the person's background. It depends on the person. It depends on how quickly they can pick up these techniques as well.
Okay. Yeah, just saw one more question. All right. Well, I think that's about it for the night. We're running out of time. You have some amazing photographs. These are just unbelievable. And thank you for your information. This is one of the more really interesting talks that we have had. I really appreciate the fact that you took your time to do this. I know from looking at some of the papers you sent me, you're pretty much all over the world, all over the place. And we want to thank you for coming. We also really want to thank Edwards Aquifer again, because they're the ones that, them and another generous NSF member, helped us get up and off the ground and running with our NSF webinars. If there's anything that you participants think would be very interesting to hear, please email us and let us know. All of this, again, will be posted on the website of the NSS. We have a new page. Our webmaster, Alex, made a brand new link. for for our new endeavor here. And we will be posting more as time goes on. We have 3 in the wings right now. We just got to get them finalized, get a date, and get them set up. And Jess, we can't thank you enough for all of your time and effort. I know you've spent an awful lot of time on this. I will apologize for my technical difficulties. Murphy just kind of happens to hang around. And everybody have a good night.